And we're back with Ray Wednesday. And this time it's going to have to be even shorter than last week, which is unfortunate. Wait, maybe not. Well, yeah, probably. Anyway, so first we're going to look through the Israel Palestine conflict. Got to start out large, got to start out with something controversial. So, for the year of 2025, this was basically a big deal because there was a ceasefire. You see, the problem with Israel is they keep on killing journalists, they keep on committing war crimes, and nobody can really do anything, especially because America has largely been on their side. But this has somewhat changed. And the most interesting part about this is that it was largely the shift on the right of America that ended up changing a lot of this. Because what happened was the left had been saying, oh, we want a ceasefire. Oh, we want Israel to stop doing this. We want Israel to stop doing that. Nobody even cared. The funniest part is Kamala Harris didn't even care about what the left had to say. And she was trying to pander to the left. It's America's in a very funny state right now because there are so many people who are not politically active, but they have very strong political opinions on what should happen, and they're mostly on the left. They're not they're just not nearly as engaged as they should be in a healthy democracy. So the problem was there was not a lot of engagement with America. Now, of course, the Israel-Palestine conflict is not all up to America, but a lot of what Israel does is up to America because America has such a large force in international politics, especially with the United Nations. But the United Nations doesn't do much. But America has a lot of leverage. It's basically built into the Constitution. It can veto anything in the United Nations. That's a whole nother thing. By the way, if you're interested, that's called the P5. There's 5 permanent members of the United Nations: France, Britain, Russia, China, and America. Those are the 5. There's no camera over here. I don't know why I'm counting over here. Those are the 5 countries, and they're permanent members of the UN seats of veto power, basically. And so they could veto anything that the UN would like to do. Now, basically, this means that the UN can't really do anything because all of these 5 countries have some sort of relationship to another country in the world. So any one of those countries can say, oh, hey, America, we don't want the UN to interfere in this. And then America will say, okay, UN, you're not allowed to interfere. We veto that. And so what the UN does is instead they send a strongly worded letter. Now, even if the UN could do something, usually they're still just going to send a strongly worded letter anyway. So no matter what, there's not a whole lot changing there. Anyway, my point in saying all of that is I just have like my webcam. I feel like I should have something else showing. Why did why did my voice get like dramatically worse as soon as I started streaming? I don't know what happened there. Anyway, so like what do I put on as a background picture? Boom, blue. So hopefully you're not watching this late at night because you'll just get that beautiful blinding blue light that's just going to destroy your eyes, your melatonin levels. Not your melanin, that's something else. Anyway, so the problem is there was a dramatic change in Israel-Palestine because people, not because, this was just one of the many factors. Obviously, the main factors are the factors going on in Palestine and Israel, mainly Israel. Palestine doesn't really have a say in what happens. Tens of thousands of civilians can die in Palestine, and there's not going to be a dramatic effect because nobody cares about them. If we're being totally honest, nobody really cares about, well, not nobody. There are a lot of people who care about Palestinians, but they don't have leverage on the world stage. So what happens in that area is largely up to Israel, and then that is largely affected by America. Okay, going back to America, there was a large shift on the right because the right has become a little bit more xenophobic. The right has become a little bit more anti-international. Then they've been especially focused now on South America rather than things that are across the Atlantic Ocean. That's too far away for their small, narrow focus. So they realize that they don't want to get involved in Israel. And then on top of that, there's been some figures who have been increasingly anti-Semitic on the right, including people like Nick Fuentes. And then there's very weird and interesting stuff happening on the right of America. But since the right has leverage in America right now, what happened was that was one of the large driving forces for why Israel might like to be shaping up a little bit more. Now the question is, has Israel been shaping up? Has there been dramatic change yet? Not really. The ceasefire was a huge step in the right direction, but it's like saying that an alcoholic is doing better because they don't drink on Tuesdays. It's a step in the right direction, but obviously we want more. An important consideration here is in the ceasefire deal, they don't want Israel to cross the yellow line. So basically about half of Palestine is split up, and Israel military forces are not allowed to cross this yellow line. Now, of course, because they're Israel, they're crossing the yellow line. So, that's really no surprise. You know what I could do? I could this is something funny. I could try to keep up with like Microsoft Paint in the background. It's the blinding white light. Okay, cool. I don't actually use Microsoft Paint. I use Screenshot and then boom. Okay. So basically they're not allowed to cross this yellow line. And because they're Israel, they're crossing the yellow line. They're going across it. They don't care about it. And I can't see my screen. Hopefully it's working. I'm going to have to switch this up at some point, how my screenshot settings work. Oh my gosh, my voice. Okay, we're good. So anyway, they are, you know what I could do? I could go on Pixlr, but I don't have a Pixlr. One second. Oh, hello. Now we're even more intimate. The thing is anybody going to notice that my voice is off? I don't think so. So going back to it, it seems like Israel is doing that thing where it just legitimately does not care about what anybody else has to say. Now they're kind of participating in the ceasefire, but another important thing that's happening is they're not allowing humanitarian aid back in. At one point, I believe it was the United Nations in charge of delivering meals, and they were doing a much better job than Israel, which makes a lot of sense. Bro, can we just, what are we doing out here, man? Like, can we just have like a regular, oh, this is beautiful. Oh, it's beautiful. No, not you. Come back. Okay. Hilarious. I didn't really think about what would be happening in the background, I thought that I would just mess around with my face, but like we're talking about serious stuff here, okay? And so as such, I need to have just a very serious background, of course. It's funny. I'm putting in all this work just for... Okay. So anyway, they crossed the yellow line. And Israel is... there's some civilian casualties, as to be expected, but it's not as bad as you might think. Also, it's important to note that you don't have to be anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. There's a lot of people criticizing Israel, Jews among them. That was the main thing. Oh my gosh. Wait, there was new news. Now, I don't like to report on news that is like very new. This just in. I'm not I don't want to be a reporter who does like live reveals, but apparently they are trying to go into the next phase of the ceasefire, which is hopefully better. So that's something to look out for. Okay, cool. This system is terrible. I could just go back to this because this is my actual favorite system. Is just doing this, but oh my gosh, I blinded myself again. But again, the problem with this is that when I do this, I can't see anything else. I have no idea what's going on my monitor. I'm gonna break my monitor, man. All right, cool. Let's go back to Russia, Ukraine. I like how I said back to, and then I'm talking about something that we didn't talk about. Well, actually, we did talk about this last week. So last week I told you that the casualties went up. Actually, I said that the deaths went up, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But I was talking about civilian casualties, or I'm talking about civilian casualties right now. From the period of the very beginning of 2025 to the middle of 2025. So about June, really. There was a major increase in deaths in the Russo-Ukrainian War. I believe that's the proper name. And that amount of deaths was much larger than the amount of deaths that was happening in 2024. So now that we're at the end of the year, the amount of deaths in the Russo-Ukrainian War has overall gone up from 2025 compared to 2024. The amount of civilian casualties has gone up. It's gone up by about 30% based on the numbers that I'm looking at. But all in all, the war has just gotten worse, especially if you're not a fan of Russia taking over places that they shouldn't be taking over. Bro, this is... we're looking at a black screen. I'm being so special right now. It's okay. So they're going to steal the Donbass. Here we are. You know what? The quality of this image is perfect. So they're going to take the Donbass, which is this area. They've already basically annexed Crimea. Crimea doesn't... I mean, yeah. Anyway, they're not supposed to have really any of this region. But they're taking it anyway. Now, an important thing to note is that their progression through this area is very slow. It almost seems like they are not, when I last looked into this, they're not really accelerating through this whole area. They're not really on pace to take all of Ukraine, even though they are really wanting to go into a state of increased warfare. It sounds like Russia is always trying to up the ante and go further, push the boundaries further. It seems like they might actually want an end to the war with the Donbass and Crimea. The most important thing that they're going to want is obviously they're going to want to make it so that Ukraine has no military after this. Because then if Ukraine has no military once they make the treaty, and they make sure that Ukraine cannot increase their military force, well then obviously Russia's going to come back in and they're just going to take everything. That's actually one of their main plans. Now, Zelensky will probably not let them do that because pretty much every time they strike up this deal, Zelensky is like, hey, you know, by the way, this deal isn't too good because Russia can just take Ukraine in 5 years. What they'll do is they'll just increase their military power and then they'll come back and they'll take all of Ukraine. And then everybody else is like, shut up, Zelensky, we don't care. Because they just want to look good right now. First of all, Putin wants him to shut up because he wants to take all of Ukraine. And then any other leaders, you know, we don't have to mention them by name. They just want to look good. Okay, we're done for today. I have to go to bed. That is all. Good night immediately. Goodbye.